accountable for being part of this. Strange Encounter at Work by Fok Joe W. So this story happened at my work in the Netherlands. I'm 29 now. This story happened about 10 years ago. At the time I was jobless. I found a job as a security guard in an office building. The office building was in a forested area away from the busy streets, like secluded. The person who had the job there before me had a car accident and apparently was paralysed from the waist down. Nobody was interested in the job since you worked during the night and the office building was so big. It was just boring as hell, but hey, a job's a job. Once I started, a supervisor worked with me for the first week. He was supervising me on what to do, etc. So now, it was time for my first night work by myself. I came to work and took the shift over from my colleague at 9 PM. He told me that there were still some people left in the building. Before I went up to the 15th floor, I closed the main entrance in such a way that you could only exit when you're inside, so no outsiders would be able to come in. After I did this, I went up to the 15th floor where people were still working. I asked them if they needed to go anywhere else in the building, and if not, if they would be able to make their way round and close off all the other doors. And that's exactly what happened. So I did all of my rounds and found nothing out of the ordinary. I went back to my front desk. This was at around 11:30 PM, and the last people who were working on the 15th floor were just starting to leave, and they told me that there was one guy who was going to be the last to leave. I eventually saw him and he wished me a good night. Once the last people had left, I went up to the 15th floor and checked all the offices were locked down. I went down to my front desk again since there were no people left. I put the alarms on, which work on motion detection, and also when you open a fire exit on every floor except for the floor that my desk was on. Within 5 minutes, I was able to put all of the alarms on every floor. Then the alarm went off on the 10th floor. There was nobody in the building. The rule is, if an alarm goes off, you first call the security company before you take action. I told them I would investigate the alarm and I would call them back once I checked it out. Otherwise, if I didn't call back, they would send a police car to check it out as a precaution. I checked the whole 10th floor and I found nothing. So I then went back to tell the security company that I didn't find anything, just thinking that it was a false alarm. Now, I kid you not, the alarm on the 10th floor went off like another 7 times in an hour. Every time that I went to check the floor, I would literally find nothing, not even a single person there. Since this was my first day working alone and the alarms went off so many times, the security company thought I was screwing up and wanted a file to complain to my boss, which could mean that I would lose my job that I had just started for a week. In retrospect, the following was the dumbest thing I could have ever done. Because the alarm went off again, since I didn't want to call the security company again and cry wolf, I went up to the 10th floor without informing the security company. That meant that all I could do was go up there with my flashlight, since security guards in the Netherlands are not allowed to carry guns. So I went up to the 10th floor, checked the floor out, and as before found nothing. The only difference now was I pretended to leave, turn off the lights, and stayed on the 10th floor, listening to see if anyone was there. In about 5 minutes, I heard someone or something moving. I was relieved and anxious at the same time, relieved that I wasn't wrong and that there was something on the floor, anxious because of what was going on. I then turned on the lights and tried to sound as manly as possible, saying something along the lines of, "I know someone's here, show yourself." As you can imagine, I didn't get any response. So stupidly, I didn't go down to call for any help. I went looking to find whatever it was that I heard on the 10th floor. I walked to the office I heard the sound from, turned on the lights and found a little girl who couldn't be older than 13 with long brown hair, in white pyjamas, squatting and rocking back and forth on a desk, looking straight at me. The scary thing? There was no emotion in her face or in her eyes. I was so shook I didn't know what to do. I was terrified initially, but eventually I managed to get ahead of my nerves slightly, and I gone up to her and took her by the hand. Like, what can a small girl do? I'm actually 6'8", so I shouldn't have had too much to worry about, right? I took her down to the front desk and asked her if she wanted a Coke, but she didn't respond whatsoever. The only thing I could do was call my supervisor and tell him about what I had encountered. His response was, "Stay right there, I'm going to be right over." So then I had to hang up the phone and just wait for him to come. I just had this underlying feeling with this girl that there was something really, really wrong with her. Before my supervisor turned up, he called me and told me to call an asylum, which was pretty close to the office building I was working at, just to make sure that nobody was missing. Why would a 13-year-old girl be in an office building with no houses nearby whatsoever? So that's just what I did. I called the asylum, asking them if there was someone missing from the asylum, and I got the scariest response that you can get. They told me, yes, as a matter of fact, there is someone missing. I gave them a description of the girl sitting next to me, and it was in fact the girl who was missing from the asylum. They told me that she was very dangerous and that I should watch my back at all costs. They immediately sent people over to come take the girl with them. A week later, my supervisor told me the story of the girl I found. Since he talked with the people from the asylum, it turns out the girl killed her mum and dad and little brother while they were sleeping. Even while in the asylum, she still wounded staff members, either by stabbing them with a pencil or in another case biting a piece of an ear off. To this day, we have no idea how she even got into the building. We checked all of the cameras and there's no evidence of her even entering the building. Things Get Creepy During the Night Shift by Bowling Commando.
Okay, so a little backstory before I begin. This is one of the crazy experiences of mine that happened during my 2-year security career, from 2013 to 2015. I am a 6'7" male in Australia. I'd like to think I'm a fairly tough and intimidating guy, but some of the shit that used to go on at the mall that I used to work the night shift for still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large. Probably the largest in my state, I'd say. And all the way up to about 8:30 p.m., it would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher all the stragglers out, and only at about 11 p.m. would all of the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure that no one was sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was very rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around, trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally far outnumbered by the 4 to 5 of us on shift at a time, and they would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of security. This one night though, shit started getting really weird for me on the night shift. So I'd say it was about 2 o'clock, and I was standing in the middle of an empty food court, eating a sandwich. This was the only part of the mall that had any light at nighttime, due to the skylight, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway, leading off from the food courts into some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge, and I flicked on my torch, without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway, flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 or 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder, until I was at the end of the hallway, and there was the toilet doors to the left and right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilets though. I gripped the handle and opened the door. A tiny little crack. The noise was now very clear, and had me not scared, but confused. I yelled, "Oi, who's in there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused for a moment, listening hard through the tiny crack of the door, and I swear to fucking God I could hear breathing. Low male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. "This is 1-3. I need help in food court bathrooms. I think someone's here." No response. This was really strange, and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. "This is 1-3. Does anyone copy?" Still no response. I can remember whispering to myself, "What the actual fuck?" I again opened the door a tiny crack. "Listen, mate," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't fucking come out with your hands up, you're going to end up eating your teeth tonight. Do you want that?" I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point, but there was still no response. In fact, now there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom, "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault you'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was that metal noise? What the fuck is even happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight slowly across the room. All the cubicles were open. Weird. But other than that, the room was totally empty. I was totally shitting myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me. Scared to the core, I let out a faint, "This is some horror movie shit, eh? Come out!" when I heard the long, whining squeak of the door behind me. I span around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch on a fucking massive man, at least a head taller than me, or so it seemed in my state at the time. He was Caucasian, and at least in his 40s with matte gray hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty fucking smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some shit like that. I'm not going to lie, I was so scared that I froze. He lifted his finger up to his mouth. Shh. Before swinging the door open all the way and sprinting out with what looked like some type of metal box in his hand. Turns out, he was just behind the toilet door when I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so fucking close to him, and I didn't even fucking notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on to telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had similar stories, but none that were as much of a close shave as mine. I worked the night shift for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around in a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason, my radio fucked itself. Why? So weird old guy in the toilets. Let's not meet ever again.
My Work Shift This Past Saturday by McBurger. I work part-time for my university's IT department. I manage the public computer sites, fix machines when they're broken, handle scheduling of the other consultants, etc. I'm basically on my call most of the time. During the summer weekend, there's nothing to do except for get paid, really. The campus library is across the hall from my office. Normally it is open, even on the weekends, but it was closed for the intersession this weekend before the semester begins, so the lights are off and the doors are locked. There's no way to get in there unless you have a swipe access card, which I do, because there's some computers kept in there. So I'm in my office passing time on the internet when I hear a bit of a racket. I peek out the door and there's this bigger man, probably about 40, tugging on the doors and trying to rip them open. He notices me and yells to come out and asks me, "When does this place open?" I pointed to the hours sign and explained that it would be open on Monday when classes begin. He then walks away and seems unsatisfied with the answer that I'd given him. More time passes, and out of boredom, I decide to go check out the library. I'd been there in some occasions before when it was closed, so this was nothing out of the ordinary for me. I swipe my card and go in. It's really creepy in that place when it's closed. I wasn't supposed to be in there. If I got caught, I'd probably be in a small amount of trouble, since I really didn't have permission or a reason to be in another department's area during the closing hours. When I got there, I found that all of the lights were off, except for some light that was coming through the windows. This place is huge. You can hear the ventilation fans clicking on and off. As I'm creeping through the aisles, I hear the locked door study area creak and make noises occasionally, almost as if there was somebody in there. This is often true, as students were known to hide in there after the library is closing to study in a quiet setting. But the library has been closed for almost 24 hours at this point. Nobody's going to be camping in there. It didn't make any sense. Still, as I walk alone in this place, it feels like I'm not alone, and I go to the lounge area and sit down for a bit until I feel comfortable with all the dark and silence, but it didn't work. I had to get up again soon. I then go towards the bathroom area, and as I do so, I notice somebody's in the stall. All I can see is one foot at first glance from underneath the door. One naked foot, no shoes or socks in a public restroom. One naked foot. There's a small pool of blood on the floor in the stall, and small trickles of it around the foot. I froze up for a small moment and tighten up. I was startled at first because I hadn't seen anybody in here before, but especially didn't expect to see anything like that. I didn't see any sort of socks or shoes around. Nothing normal, it just didn't make sense to me. I didn't even see a second foot, just the pale cold white large one that I could. The stall door is partially open, but not enough that I could see inside from my angle. I say with a shaken voice, "Hello?" No response. Nothing. I wonder if there's even a body attached to that foot. I wonder if there's a dead body inside. I wonder if some kid's done something terrible. I ask, What are you up to, man?" Then my toes curl up, flex and relax. I promptly turned around towards the door and walk out of the library quickly. I go back into my office as I try to make sense of what I just saw. Should I call the campus police? I just really didn't want to get involved with all the paperwork and questions with the police. I justified that I wasn't supposed to be over there anyway, and I would have to lie about the reason I was there, and I called my friend Andy instead. I just wanted to talk to somebody about what I'd just seen. I felt so uneasy. Andy and I talked for a good 40 minutes. Most of it was like, "Whoa, dude, that's messed up." Heavily considering calling the police now. I know I should have, but too much time had passed and I assumed that the person would be long gone. The bloody foot also certainly thought that he was alone, so he would have been startled by my appearance too. I decided I was going back and stayed on the phone with Andy. I knew how stupid this was. If someone is hurting themselves, they may not care to hurt me either. They're probably very unstable and they have some sort of weapon. I'm not in any mood to get into a knife fight during my shift, but I still go back to check the bathroom once again. As I walk through the library, it's worse this time because now I'm not alone and there's somebody here, possibly armed. Still, in dead silence and dark. I softly walk into the bathroom and listen outside the door for a moment. I don't hear any sound, but I get chills. Andy is on the speakerphone, but staying silent for me. I go inside. The foot is still there. This time, it has more liquid around it than before. still cold and pale looking. The door is now shut to the stall. The only other thing that had changed in the last 40 minutes was that I was really hoping not to see anyone in there this time. I don't want a possibly angry person coming at me. I then ask, "You alright?" No response, no motion, just that pale thought. It makes me feel sick. I repeat, "Are you okay in there? Do you want me to call for help?" Slowly, the foot turns and points towards me. A second foot steps down alongside it. Whatever is inside the stall is now standing facing directly at me, with the wall between us. I can't see the top of any head. My heart starts frantically racing, then a deep voice responds, "I'm fine." That was good enough of an answer for me to promptly turn around and leave. This time I run. I had told myself before going in that if he was in there, I'd definitely call the police. I still didn't. He said he was fine. I wanted to put this over my head and forget about it. The voice sounded like a man who was in his 30s or 50s. The size of the feet made him seem very big. Maybe not tall, it's hard to say. I lock the door to my office and do nothing for the next 30 minutes or so during my shift. When I then step out into the hallway, there are some footprints walking out of the library over to my office door. Plenty of them are outside my door. It was pacing and standing there for a while. There were small drops of blood leading away from my door and stopped after a small distance. I was horrified. I hurried to my truck. I paused for a moment and realized the amount of blood outside my office door. I can't just leave. I'll probably be asked about it anyway, so I should just call it in. I reluctantly head back. I find that all of the footprints are mostly gone. All of the footprints of blood and the drops have been wiped away. There are small smears here and there, but they're still gone. It wasn't a perfect cleaning job, but they're gone. I was only gone at my truck for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Whatever it is still here, hanging around, watching me, cleaning up after itself too. I am very frightened. I go back to my truck. There are bloody towels in my door handle, on the ground, on the hood of my truck. This person is seriously messing with me. I hurry right over to the campus police. I am just going to tell them the whole story, even the fact that I was also trespassing and that I went back for a second visit instead of calling the police first as I did. I told them all. They took pics of my car and told me that they would look into it. They returned to the library but requested that I do not accompany them back inside. I went home. This was about 2 days ago and I've not heard back anything since. The Mall Night Shift by Jorbo125.
This encounter happened to me a couple days ago. Friday night. I was so shocked by it I forgot to post it to the subreddit after it happened. It was a normal Friday night like any other. Watch some late night TV. We've all been there. But when I went to go get some snacks for my viewing, I noticed my cupboard was bare. So I decided to make a quick run to the local gas station to pick up a cheap midnight snack. It was late, and it was the only place within walking distance that was open. But when I got to the gas station, there was this man there. Disheveled hair. He looked young, but his skin was so oddly weather-beaten for someone so young-looking, and his eyeballs had these yellow spots on them. Unnerving to say the least. But he was the cashier, so I didn't have much reason to be afraid of him yet. I grabbed some stuff, lay it out on the counter, and start fishing around for my debit card. Then the cashier smiles. "You like those Gatorades?" His teeth. I'll never forget those teeth. The only way I could describe them was pure evil, almost like they didn't fit his head. I nod politely, praying silently that that'll be the end of it. He rings up my groceries and I scan my card. And then he says, "Hold on, I need to replace the printer paper." And he walks back somewhere I can't see. But I look at the card scanner. There's no printer feed on it at all. Okay, fair enough. Maybe I don't understand how receipt scanners work. Maybe I don't know where to look for the receipt to come out. But then, I see this other guy at the door. He's trying to lock it. My red flags go off like crazy. I grab my card and leave my groceries there, rushing to the door. I'm pounding on it like crazy, and the other guy is trying to stop me. I hear the cashier coming back, so I panic and push the other guy into one of the aisles, giving me the opportunity to unlock the door and rush out. I haven't been back to that gas station since. Now I know to buy my groceries ahead of time.
I was a night shift worker who always worked with this other guy, Carl. We got on very well together, and there was never a time that we would have to do anything alone. But one day this such thing happened. We were stationed at a building site that had one area that was active and the rest was being restored. We were quite a long way out in the country, so it was very rare that we would encounter any other people whatsoever. On this one night, we were both waiting at our patrol post. I was in the truck and so was Carl. We didn't have to always go inside our building, but it was a lot easier if we were just in the truck so we could quickly jump out if anything happened, get into locations very fast. We did get a radio call though. They called in for just Carl, telling him that something had come up and they needed him to go out there immediately and take the truck, while that they wanted me to stay behind and guard the entrance. Now this didn't make any sense at the time, because why would they want one of us to go out alone, leaving the other miles away potentially without a truck? Needless to say, we didn't question this. I then jumped out of my car and immediately began to patrol the area where that I was, and I said my goodbyes to my buddy and he left. So I was there, but I had my torch in one hand and radio in other, because even though I was away from him, I wasn't going to let him out of my communication. Nothing too strange happened on my part. I decided that after a while I wanted to find what was up. I wasn't allowed to interrupt Carl initially because obviously he was busy dealing with the incident. I did see his tail lights go a very long way from me towards a forested area. I was so scared for my friend, because why on earth should he have to go out there alone? I started to get frustrated and swearing because I wasn't going to let anything happen to my friend, but he was so far away from me, there was nothing I could have done to protect my buddy. I wasn't just going to stay there and let this slip. I had to do something. I decided that I was going to radio into command and ask them what in their right minds did they think they were doing, sending out my friend up there alone. Even if there was two people, how was he meant to handle it? So I did just that. This is the response that I got. "What are you talking about? We've not even sent you any radio requests for the entire day. We really need you to copy and send that over again." I then frantically explained the same thing over to them, and this time I was just met by silence. They just told me that they were going to get into contact with Carl and to get inside as soon as possible. I asked desperately what they were on about, but I had to follow orders, so I did just that. I began screaming out for my friend. I had no idea what was going on. I had no chance of running out to get to him because it would have taken me at least 20 minutes to get there, and I would have left my post and I didn't know what was up. So I waited at the post hut for what felt like an eternity. I was so scared, and at every sound I felt like I was going to have a heart attack. Eventually, I did hear some more radio chatter, and though I wasn't meant to, I turned it up fully to try and hear what was going on. Carl was out of my radio range, so I wasn't able to hear him for the entire time. It was Command talking to him with the powerful radio, saying that backup was about to be sent immediately and that he needed to get out there as soon as possible and evacuate the site. I waited for what felt like an eternity. I was just so worried about my friend, but I was ready to kill someone for him if anything happened. I began to pray because I was so scared for my friend, and I knew I couldn't interrupt what Command were doing because it'd just distract them and take time away from Carl. Eventually, I heard what sounded like a truck, and to my relief, it was him coming back frantically. I asked him what was up, and he said, "No time, just get in the truck, we've got to get out of here." And that's just what we did. We got immediately out of the complex facility and went back to base. We weren't even allowed to hang around for the other security, but we did see a ton of cars going back there. When we eventually made it to Command, they all had a pale look on their face and said the following. We decided to check the cameras up where Carl was. They saw at least 2 vans waiting behind some bushes and 6 people all hiding amongst the trees. They couldn't make out clear enough exactly who they were, just that there were figures there waiting for him. They then informed to us that the Command had never given out a single order. It was just them who were trying to do God knows what to him. I did eventually find out later exactly what was going on through the police investigation findings. What they found might even be more terrifying than what I initially thought. When they got there, they found a load of mannequins and 2 cars that were barely working. It turns out that this was all set up by a crazy guy who had recently escaped out of an asylum. I just thank God that Carl is okay and that this guy can get the help that he desperately needs. This was a story that happened to me 15 years ago, but I only just decided to share it today. During one summer, I was struggling for work. I had been out of work for at least 2 months by this point. I did have some savings, but they were pretty much all gone, so I was really desperate to take any job that I could. As I was walking back from a friend's house, I did bump into this one guy. There was a very large abandoned hospital complex near where I used to live. It used to be used by the military, but it was basically sat vacant now, surrounded by fields and wilderness. Nobody had been in there for years. The place was rumoured to be haunted and very creepy. I didn't believe any of the rumours about it being haunted, I just knew that it was very scary. Anyway, as I was walking past it, this guy caught my attention. He was waving me down. I began walking past the blue gates up towards him. "Hey. Hi, I was wondering, do you think you could do a night shift for me?" "Yeah, it's alright. A night shift?" "Yeah, a night shift. We're basically really low on staff and, well, between me and you, we really haven't got anybody who's willing to do this job. Will you take it?" I'd been out of work so long at that point that I thought this was a blessing. To be honest, I didn't like working anything related to night shifts because, to be honest, I really don't like being alone, especially not during the night. But like I said, my savings were just about running out, so I accepted. So within a week from that point, I was already working the job. For the most part, I'd been working with another guy who'd been showing me around, and to be honest, the job was pretty alright. We just had to patrol it, but because it was during the summer, it was quite pleasant to be able to wander around at night. There was multiple buildings that we were not allowed to go in due to asbestos and other weird things that we had been warned about. Apparently there were also some very dangerous chemicals kept in some of these buildings because they were used during wartime. But I wasn't allowed to get any information about this. I had brought it up a few times because I was worried about my health, but I just kind of put up with it and knew that as long as I didn't actually go in there, I'd be safe. So the job was going pretty well until one day I got informed by the other guy I was working with, John, that he would no longer be working the night shift anymore. He said sorry, but he said that he had to part ways and that it would be up to me now to do it alone. The first thing I thought in my head was, great, this is the last thing that I need. I have felt scared enough doing it with him, but let alone on myself. I hadn't been working here long enough to be able to run a thing like this. I was more worried about getting fired than anything because I was almost sure that I was going to have a slip up. Thing is, what could I do about it? I wouldn't have had a choice even if I wanted to make things be different. I just had to man up to the fact that this is what was happening. The thing was, at the time, I was still blessed that I'd even been given a job. It scares me even now thinking about what would have happened if no work opportunities had come up. So that was it. After the next shift, he eventually parted ways with me and I said my goodbyes to him. I really missed John because I had never stayed in contact with him. He was such a good friend to me, it just feels stupid that I didn't stay in touch, but I guess that's just how it is. So, on my first night shift alone, I was obviously terrified, but the thing was, like I said, I just had to man up to it. I knew being scared wouldn't get me anywhere, right? And it was so warm, I really enjoyed just walking around in the evenings like that. On the first day of my night shift, nothing out of the ordinary happened. I did hear some strange sounds though when I was up one end of the complex, though I'm pretty sure that was just my mind playing tricks on me. Nothing too bad. I had a pretty normal week after that. The first strange thing that happened was on the next Friday. I always remember the Fridays because it would be the longest shift that I would have to do. I wanted to be going out, but again I didn't have any choice. I was more grateful to be having work. So I was patrolling like normal. I was actually just outside of the patrol building because I went outside to have a smoke. As I was doing so, I was looking back at the big gated entrance that we have. As I was doing so, something just felt off. I almost felt like I was being watched. Just out of the corner of my eye, I captured what looked like a shadowy figure staring at me through the gates. Now, I can't be 100% of this because by the time I put my cigarette down and looked back, it was gone, whatever it was. Now, I know that the regulation was to go up there and check out anything that was found to be suspicious or radio it in, but I had just had this feeling that something was off about it and I should stay put. I was almost certain that it was just my mind. So I just put that idea to bed and continued on with the rest of my shift. Now I did have a few more problems later that night where there were some foxes and other animals that were disturbing the guard dogs that were on site. What would happen was they would start barking like mad and we would have to go out to try and scare away the foxes so they would be more calm. Because some guard dogs can be trained not to go after animals like that and just people, but the guard dogs that they had on site didn't do so. Eventually though, after sorting out the dogs, my shift eventually come to an end. As the following morning come, I gone and spoke to my manager who just arrived at the gates. I walked up there and let him in, and I did have a strange feeling still about what I thought I saw staring back at me. I'd gone and told him about what had happened, just because I couldn't shake it, and he didn't really say anything initially. He just kinda looked at me then said, "Oh yeah, don't worry, your mind just plays tricks on you, and if your night eyes haven't set in then you're gonna see things anyway." I thought he was probably right, but I know for a fact that I saw something then. And that was it. I went home, had an ordinary day, gone to sleep and woke up a few hours later ready for my shift again. The weird thing was, when I was driving back to go to work again, I began to slowly remember my dream and I had a dream that I was sleeping in my bed and there was a small shadowy figure there staring back at me. I didn't think it was anything though, because I couldn't remember my dream fully, so I just put it down to me being paranoid. I was getting a little bit annoyed at myself because I thought I shouldn't be causing myself this much stress just trying to make money. But again, money was money and times were really hard back then. So I continued on my way and eventually arrived at the site. I got there and there was nobody else present because there was a very small window where that people would be around the site but wouldn't need to be directly in it. This meant that upon entering and locking the gate behind me, I was effectively locking myself into the site with people maybe there, maybe not. I always found this unsettling. I gone to check on the dogs, make sure they're alright, and went to my post. I did have a schedule that I had to follow, which meant that I was going to have to be patrolling the longer side perimeter for at least 2 hours. I never went to this side of the perimeter normally because it was very hard to monitor and there was a lot of overgrowth, so it meant that it was very hard to track or trace anybody who was loitering or whatever. As I was in my post, pretty scared, I had looked up because I had this weird feeling that something was watching me, and as I looked up, I was met with something staring right back at me, just beyond the gate, as a dark figure where I could barely make out facial features. It looked like a tall man now, with piercing black eyes staring back at me. I almost fell off my chair when I saw this and immediately radioed in for help. I was meant to go out and investigate, but I just lied because I wasn't armed. All I had on me was a torch, so I wanted to wait for the guys who were armed to go and check it out while pretending that I had already done that. Now, I know that this is very bad, but I was just so scared that I couldn't go outside the door. This felt like it was something paranormal, but it didn't make sense because I was sure that this site was not haunted at all. I just thought it was very weird. I eventually got my jacket on and my hand was still shaking when I opened the door with my flashlight. I went out a couple of minutes before the other guys would arrive so they wouldn't figure out what I was doing. They eventually come to me. To my surprise, I'd already done a search and sweep round without me realising. They told me that there was nothing to worry about and it's probably just my mind playing tricks on me. They then told me that they knew that I was new to the job and that I should just be more careful next time because there's lots of false alarms, so just be sure before I call security. They kind of given me a break because of me not working there for too long, but it was reassurance nonetheless and guidance. I shook their hands and wished them a good night and went straight back to my post. As I was in my post, I realised that I was still yet to go out and check the far side of the site. I was more annoyed than scared now because I was just worrying that my mind was constantly playing tricks on me and I knew that fear would only feed this. So I got my light and followed the map and began my patrol. It was a very long walk and the only way I can describe it is almost like I was walking through a ghost town. It almost felt as if that as I was walking, the place was still fully inhabited and there were people watching from every single window at me. I was constantly checking over my shoulder and I remembered there was one point where I swear I saw a shadow move in one of the buildings. As I looked up there and shined my torch, there was nothing. I remember my torch went out for a second and I didn't know why, and I was almost certain that I saw one of them shadows in them buildings again. I hit my torch to get it on and there was nothing. I remember this was one of the very rare moments in my life where I genuinely just stopped and looked around and thought, what on earth am I doing? I'm out here completely alone. I was completely out of radio range and there was nothing I could do really if I needed help except for call out. And it was just harrowing to know that I was surrounded by all these buildings with potentially anything in them. I don't know how to describe the feeling, but you feel very small in these situations. No matter how big and tough you are, you feel like you're prey to something. It's something that you've got to experience to fully understand. As I began walking further, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was again being watched. I eventually arrived at the far end and I actually found some peace here. That entire feeling of being watched and that you're in somebody else's place you shouldn't be just vanished. It was almost as if when I got back to nature I felt most safe. As I was up here, I did my search and I didn't find anything, luckily. Now, it was a very long search, but when you have nothing else to do, it's very peaceful and the time seems to go very quickly. I did hear a strange scratching sound and it gave me a heart attack for a second, but I knew that this was just a fox. My fear went away again straight away, and this almost took my mind off all the other things that had been happening. As I was there, my alarm went on my watch telling me that I had to return. I looked back up at where I had to walk and it just hit me just how scary of a job I was doing. When I looked back, all I could see was empty building after empty building in pure darkness. I may not have mentioned at this point, but there was no lights whatsoever apart from that of my post. I had no fibre in my body telling me that it was a good idea to go back. I began walking and I just couldn't. I don't know what it was, but I had a strange feeling in me that was telling me that there was no good thing to come of going any further. I looked back behind me and just shook my head. Now, I stopped again for a second and thought that maybe I really am losing my mind and I've got to go and get help as quick as possible. So I just sat down on the ground. I began getting very lost and deep into my own thoughts because I was really worrying about my health because how stressed I'd been getting to this point, and I was thinking, how on earth can I keep doing this job? It can't be healthy to be under this much stress this often. I then looked down at my watch to see how much time I'd spent not going back, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My watch was displaying 3 AM exactly, by the second, to the decimal point exactly. I thought there's no way that could possibly be a chance. Literally all I saw was 3:00:00. How could a time have elapsed that quick? That would have meant that I'd stopped for an entire hour, but it just wasn't possible. There's no way it could have been. I thought that this was a little strange. I really didn't know what to make of it. I tried resetting my watch, but I couldn't do it at all. Just as I was looking down at it, I heard a branch snap behind me. It scared the life out of me. I jumped up but realised it was just due to some winds it had picked up. I decided it was best for me to get back in now if a storm was coming, and I hesitantly began the very slow footsteps that would eventually start leading me to the direction I needed to be going. As I was walking, the wind really began picking up and howling. The thing that didn't make sense was we had had clear weather all summer. We hadn't even had a cloud in the sky, let alone any wind, for months. And why did it suddenly come on just as I was sitting there? I looked down at my watch again and it was dead. I knew the most important thing for me to do now would be to get out of there safe. I didn't know what was up, but I didn't like it. Maybe somebody was playing a very cruel prank on me, but how could they possibly be controlling my watch? Obviously they couldn't be controlling the weather, but why was my watch malfunctioning? I still wasn't in radio range. I just put my head down and started jogging back towards where I needed to go. As I was jogging, I started slipping and I dropped my keys. As I went down to pick them up, I felt the rain on my neck. A true storm had suddenly picked up. I was only just within range of the start of the houses at this point. Now you have to believe me that what I'm saying is true. As the lightning flashed for the first time, Out of the corner of my eye, I swear I saw people lying in every building. I wasn't sure what I'd just seen, and the adrenaline was still pumping, so I didn't have enough time to process it, and I just started fully sprinting back. It was an absolute downpour at this point. I was slipping and almost hurt my knee trying to get back so frantically. Now, I wasn't religious, but I began praying, asking God to please save me and sorry for any wrongdoing that I'd done in my life. I was sprinting for what felt like forever. I had to stop for a second to catch my breath. As I looked up, I wasn't where I thought I was. I looked around and I ran into a part of the complex that I'd never seen before. I was standing there not knowing what to do, trying to get my bearings. I was almost sure that I was gonna die or at least get very badly hurt. I then reached for my radio and tried to signal in for some help, but all I got was static. I couldn't seem to get the radio to switch off either, so all I had was this constant static sound. I once again asked for help, and I then heard what may have sounded like a voice within all the static, but I can't be sure. I was so scared by this that I just threw my radio to the ground. I knew that this was stupid, but I had to pick it up again and get going, no time to think. Then I heard a voice again. Ryan, Ryan. It was then followed by more static, but that was the other guys working. That was the other part of the security team. I desperately tried screaming into the radio, but it was just pure static playing back at me. I began jogging back and I eventually found my bearings to the path where I was. I then began the trek back to where my post was, as I was just about to head right through them gates the second I got there. The guard dogs were going absolutely mental at this point. I knew something was definitely off. I decided that it would be a lot more safe if I went to the guard dogs first, so I took a deep breath and made a desperate bolt towards them. When I got there, I couldn't believe what I found. They looked terrified. Now, these are the most mean and scary guard dogs that you've ever seen that are absolutely fearless, and when I arrived, they were whimpering and trying to hide behind me. I was trying to talk to the guard dogs, trying to calm them down, trying to get back through my radio. This time, it wouldn't even turn on. My watch was on, but it was just going crazy. It was almost as if all of the electronic equipment that was in the area just wouldn't work suddenly. The thing was, I had never had a problem like this before with my watch. I decided all I could do was go to the guard post, go get the keys, unlock the gate, save the dogs and get out of there and get help immediately and call the cops. So I began walking in the direction of my post. Now, this is the most scary thing that I will ever live to see, but please believe me in that every word of this is true. I wish I was lying to you. As I looked up to the top window of my post, I could see what looked like a tall dark figure staring straight back at me. I then instinctively shined my torch straight back at it, but no light was passing through it, so at this point I knew it was a person. I knew that I was gonna probably have to fight now, because that was the only way that I was gonna get the keys to the main gate again and sort this out once and for all. So I eventually made my way to the door, not making myself look up. The figure disappeared the second that my torch went off it, but I didn't think anything of it. I eventually got up to my post and I found that the door was locked. It didn't make any sense because I was the only one who had any keys to that place and I hadn't locked it when I left. Why would I? I couldn't get this thing open. I screamed out in rage and fear and suddenly I could get it unlocked. I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that I was petrified. The thing is, I'm not sure to this day if it is just because I was so scared that I couldn't work the door properly, but there's always something in my mind that tells me I was opening it correctly. I then take one step inside, get my keys to the gate, don't even look behind me once, go back to the dogs, open the gate, don't even lock the thing, and just sprint outside as far as I can. I keep running until there's literally no breath left in me and I have to stop. At this point, the dogs are suddenly a lot more happy. I sit down and begin stroking them when I realise that the weather's perfect. It was almost as if there was no rain or storm whatsoever. I couldn't even begin to imagine how any of that made sense. The next thing I did was call the cops and phone the police. After that, I went straight home, returned the dogs, and called my boss to hand in my resignation and said that I would never step foot back in that place again. I didn't get a follow-up by the police, but the other security guard decided to contact me because he thought it was best that I knew the following. The police did a search of the perimeter and found literally no one. They did, however, suspect that there was someone staying in the post above me because their dog would go crazy whenever he was near it, but they could not get him to go in with them, so they went in guns drawn, expecting to have some conflict. Upon entering, the place was completely trashed, as if 30 people had just went wild, doing as much damage as they possibly could, with things thrown around everywhere. The weird thing was there were some burn marks, but there was nothing that could have lighted a fire in there. Now, what they found next terrifies me. They went to search if there was any other floors where they could find people. They went up to the second level and said that there was no windows. There was a floor above it, but there was no floor or stairs leading up to it. You would just look straight up and see a window where the third floor once stood. It wouldn't have been physically possible for anyone to be standing there. I have no idea what to make sense of all of this to this day, but that one last fact is truly horrifying to me. I saw somebody staring at me through the window, but there was no floor for them to be standing on.